Hello, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here, and welcome back to the liberation of China from Western powers. Yeah, that's the story. That's it. Yeah, we're liberating them from the Western powers. See, they have a heavy bomber here. Wonder if that was given to them by events or they were stupid enough to build it. Now, mentioning heavy bombers, I have set up with not those guys. Those guys are all disorganized. These guys that we're getting ready to do our first airstrikes on Nanjing, the capital. I'm sure the Western media will approve of those actions. But to continue to prove that we are here to help our little Asian brothers and sisters, we are going to expand Menjing, I guess, and that is sort of Japanese for Mongolia. So we got Mongolia bigger now. So they've got some resources here. Well, 7 energy once they get it repaired. It was in this bad shape before we transferred it over, because we fought that capital for a while. They'll get an IC out of it. So, help them a little bit. This really was a non-industrialized part of the world. I don't know what it's like today. I know they've industrialized a lot of north of China now, and some of it's rather polluted, my understanding is. Wonder why all the leftists don't ever complain about. None of the leftists that I've ever seen that I've ever seen them out there complaining, protesting policies of governments that weren't allied to the U.S. And I know we have a few left viewers, viewers from the left here, and trust me, I'd love to have your input. I'm glad you're here watching. I love to have your input on the channel. I love to understand your views. I've recently the Saudis, I believe it was the Saudis, did some airstrikes in Yemen, and hit a school bus or something and killed a bunch of kids. And that's all over them, at least some of the media. The little kids in their backpacks and their arms torn off being carried into the hospital. And it's all so tragic. And it is, not making light of its tragedy. And these were American bombs! Okay. Yeah, they very well could have been. American weapons. What about all of the Iranian and Russian weapons that the Iranians think there's some Russian weapons? I know there's lots and lots of Iranian weapons that have been funneled into the Houthis. I'm getting that right. I think it's the Houthis, the rebels that took over Yemen and basically started a civil war. That it's a proxy war for Iran. All those weapons in there. And all the killings that they've done. I remember one documentary, I forget who it was. Someone was traveling around there, and I think it was a she, but can't be absolutely certain about it. But I think she was staying with a friend's family in Aden, and boom, there's a some sort of Houthi attack, and come to find out it was the father of the friend, who was some government doctor or something, that was sort of the target and killed. None of that. It made this documentary, but that doesn't make the press that it's Iran supplying these weapons. That doesn't make the, so they never seem to complain, protest here in the U.S. or in Europe about the left, talking the left, the anti-fascist, the Antifa, never seem to complain or protest. I mean, I'm not saying they like it. I'm not saying that they're hooray for the children killed by Iranian weapons, but they never seem to get worked up over it if it's supplied by America's enemies. And I would love to see you point to some real leftist demonstrators. And I don't mean 5 people out in front of some embassy for 4 hours once. I mean protests, an ongoing, and show me that even if it's just 5 people, show me that it hit the BBC 6 times in a day in their news cycle that they mentioned it, or Deutsche Welle or other major networks. You know, show me, link me to the news articles or the TV stuff, that how enemies of America's weapons are used to kill people, and blaming those. Because when we see the children killed in Syria, they're not blaming the Russians, they're blaming Assad. You know, they don't, you know, sure, America makes a lot of weapons and sells them. And to sell a lot of high profile stuff, because I did personally have a international arms trade license from the U.S. government. And so I know a bit about the international arms trade and some of the regulations that are there. But some of the regulations, you know, I didn't have to get permission to do some stuff from them. But I wasn't interested in buying and selling tanks. I didn't have the money to do so, but my license allowed me to. I could buy tanks from, say, China. Well, no, that's China's, the Communist Party. Well, I could buy tanks from India if I wanted to. Could be like old Soviet or old Chinese-made tanks or something. Could buy them from there. But if I sold them, I had to check on a list of approved buyers. Now, if it's U.S. made, that was a different thing, but meaning I couldn't sell to Iran, you know, weapons to Iran. Or to some guerrilla movements or terrorist movements, however you want to categorize them. I couldn't legally sell them to them. There are more restrictions for high-tech weapons and other things like that that I never really got into or got aware of. But, trust me, this was post-Cold War, and I got offers for, here's our sales list of T-72s, T-62s, you know, artillery pieces. This is what we have. You want any of this? I didn't have any of the money to play in that. I was modestly looking to import old surplus weapons into the U.S. Never really got terribly far with it, but you had to get the license to be able to go down the road of it, and I did have that. So I've had, you know, again, didn't buy any of the tanks that were lists that were faxed to me and whatnot from Eastern European arms sellers after the communist fall, you know, from and around here. Included a lot of, you know, whether they were made in the Soviet Union or made in East Germany or made in Poland, you know, East Bloc weapons and whatever. And a lot of that stuff was just sort of fascinating that they had it, and I had, you know, no customers to you know, sell it to or anything. But so I've to a point, you know, I'm not someone really high up on the thing, but I've practically, in the practical sense, gone through the licensing, gone through the U.S. government's licensing to do some of this stuff in my lifetime. So I sort of kind of know. I haven't just picked up a book or two and read it, or watched Lord of War, you know, the Nicolas Cage movie or whatever. I've done that. Oh, and yes, at some point I did travel to Eastern Europe and meet with people. But again, I was looking for old surplus stuff that import into the U.S. civil collectors market. But I have been there. I have done that. I have met with U.S. Embassy personnel dealing with weapons transfers in other countries, and talked to them about who they could put me in touch with, and just, you know, just sort of sort of setup meetings like that. I have been in them for a very small firm, very underfunded, that I was a partner in. So I have been there and done that. So I know, again, not every little ins and out, but I know what goes on. And so I have met with these people and such, and I have sometimes wonder who some of these people were that I met, like the trade person, and they knew I was coming to do stuff about weapons, and I'm talking to the U.S. diplomatic staff because we contacted them before we left the U.S. and we liked a meeting and see what they could do, and they knew it was weapons. So, did that person have other portfolios? Meaning, was he just a trade guy, or did he also do other things? Don't know. But yeah, I have been there and done that in my lifetime. So now, the main reason, and I'll tell you this straight up, the main reason traditionally, while the Soviet Union was in existence, why they didn't protest against America's enemies is because a massive amount of the funding for these peace groups, anti-war groups, leftist, other sort of groups was provided by the Soviet Union and other East Bloc types to disrupt the West. It was part of the many-front war, the many-front Cold War. And so that they would protest that. But so we won't. But this hasn't turned around, China successfully shut down most of the anti or pro-Tibetan stuff in America. If you remember, there used to be an actor in America called Richard Gere. Oh, he's still a person in America, but he can't get an acting gig to save his life because all the major studios want to have movies in China, and China has told them that if you hire Richard Gere, you may think I'm BSing about this, and no, I don't have personal knowledge of this, but and I'm not saying a Chinese ambassador has showed up in their office and said this, but one way or another, they have communicated to the movie studios that if you employ Richard Gere in one of your projects, none of your other movies will be shown in China. So it used to be really cool and trendy to support the Dalai Lama and all of that, but our U.S. government has been cozying up to China, trying to get good relations with China until Trump. Trump is the first change. Dianne Feinstein, the senator of my state in California, had been, and she's sort of changed now, been proactive advocate for China, and was the first mayor of a significant U.S. city, San Francisco. She was the mayor of San Francisco. Gavin Newsom, not current, but because he's, I think, Secretary of State for California or Deputy Governor? I think Deputy Governor. Sorry, I should know this. But he is also a former mayor of San Francisco and is most likely to be the next governor of California. Jerry Brown is our current governor. This is his second term in a row, and he's term limited out. Oh, and he was governor's many years ago. They used to call him Governor Moonbeam, because of his lunatic ideas, including wanted to set up some sort of not solar factory but moon factory that somehow got moonlight to power something. I don't know. So they gave him Governor Moonbeam. Oh, and his father, Governor Brown, was governor of California 2 or 3 terms. So if you think the Democrats are for democracy and the people, they're more for patriarchy and family lineage of government. Look at the Kennedys. Yeah, no, I'm not happy about the multiple generations of Bush either. But so San Francisco was the first significant U.S. city to set up a sister city or brother city or whatever in communist China. Was Dianne Feinstein, and she was a big proponent of trade that with China, and that's going to help open up China to the West and get them friendly to us and all this stuff. And it turns out they found out during the Obama administration, so it was kept quiet while Obama was in office. Her driver was a spy. Her multi-year driver and assistant stationed here in California, her driver when she gets there, because of course she doesn't drive herself, was a Chinese spy. He was a Chinese, or is a Chinese American. He's not in jail or in prison or anything like that, and he is still doing stuff in America, basically, in California, San Francisco. But he never had a security clearance, and he never saw any papers. Well, the driver, probably when he's not busy driving her, and the car is at her house, but she's sort of like, because she lives in a very nice house here in San Francisco, car is sitting in her house, and she may be thinking about going, or has gone out that day, or whatever, might be going out later that day. He's probably sitting in the house now, maybe in the sort of servants' quarters or something like that, but hears things, maybe has access to papers, maybe has access to a computer, who knows. And when you're driving around places like San Francisco, you're talking to people, whether on the cell phone, and she probably had a cell phone long before any of you did, in her car, or just talking to other, staff members in her car. And once you park the car, often, and I was also a driver was a candidate for Congress. That wasn't my official job, but I did drive him around for a while. Candidate for Congress, who becomes and is still a current U.S. congressman. Yes, I have done things in my life. Nothing terribly great, but things. And so, once the car is parked, you're often sort of being a bit of an assistant while he's at an event or something like that, because, at least in my experience, it wasn't like showing up with a whole huge staff. But you're sort of there, so you hear things, you hear conversations between people and whatnot. So you get tidbits of information. Now maybe none of this is classified that he's hearing. And like when he goes and drives her into the office and parks the car, he probably goes into her local congressional office where she meets with people and has stuff. And maybe none of this has any secret information, any top secret information, but he is filing reports on her thoughts and intentions, what she thinks of things, once she's done with a meeting with somebody. It's called political intelligence. It may not be the codes to how to launch the nuclear missiles or the names of the spies. Did we mention that sometime during the Obama administration, about every U.S. asset in China is killed or captured, including one person is shot on the steps of either the U.S. Embassy or one of the U.S. major consulates somewhere in China, as he's walking on it, just shot in broad daylight, as a warning. And at least publicly, no one knows how they've basically got every single, the information comes out that they get under the Obama administration, they get every single U.S. asset, person, whether it's a U.S. citizen in China. We have lots of Chinese Americans, so you could have a U.S. citizen in China, or but who's not like an official embassy staff member. The guy who was shot, I think, was a Chinese national I was talking about, but others have been shot or taken to prison or whatever, or killed or executed. Could be that, or could be somebody that has been bribed, or for ideological reasons that have given information to U.S. persons, up in China. Every single one of them. Now, of course, they probably aren't telling us if they didn't find network XYZ that's in, South China that they didn't know about, where they're probably not saying, they didn't get any of our people that we know that we have down here. Because then they start hunting for them. If they think they've got them all, we're happy to let them think that. So they might not have gotten every single one of them, but generally and stuff has come out that generally they've gotten all or most all of them. Of our human intelligence assets in China. And so this really got them looking for a mole at the top of or possibly a data breach. Could it have been this driver? I don't know, but I have no idea. But we know this happened, so she sort of changed her tune on China a bit after this. So looking at that, we have, so we're no longer so friendly with China and trying to do everything to please China, but we are still have more or less been shut down protests against China over Tibet, at least in popular news, media, and other cultures, because you know what happens if CNN or NBC or ABC or somebody puts a camera in front of a protest in front of the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., or in their consulate here in California. I'm not sure. They may have one both in L.A. and San Francisco. But in front of their protesting about Tibet and puts it on the news at night, you know what happens? Their reporters get kicked out of China. That maybe have nothing to do with it. This is no conspiracy theory. This is how China will work, is that if you have NBC News, who's associated with NBC Broadcasting, who does, other things, if you start talking too much about this stuff, they will just kick out assets. They will just not, when Xi or whoever comes to America and will grant an interview or two to American media, which will mean, at least for the news department, huge ratings for the night. It won't be your station, your company. It's not that they're going to do something super nefarious. I'm not claiming that at all. I'm not one of these, the Trilateral Commission is ruling the world, or they're, like I did say, and you can look up some news reports. There are a few stuff about killing some of these people, and you can verify if you don't believe that they shot. And again, I don't remember the exact facility, but some steps as part of the thing was walking down, and this was all within the Obama administration. I don't know exactly how, a few years ago now, but and is shot in basically broad daylight, and no one's arrested, no one's convicted. It just, I'm going to get this part. I'm guessing is like somebody was in a car, parked across the street or at the curb or wherever. They shoot the guy, the car drives away. I'm just guessing that part, but it's just, boom, person falls down, he's shot and he's dead. I don't know, once, twice, 20 times. Don't know the details beyond that. That is, and you can, again, if you want to give corrections to me, I don't know all the details, and I'm sure I'm getting some detail wrong, but that is a basic fact. I'm not talking conspiracy stuff here. If you want to dig it out, it's out there. This isn't like some Alex Jones. It's out there. It's just, actually, I heard some of this stuff on Fox News. Fox News is sort of going along with Trump in the pound on China thing. So, and you can go, it's, faux news, and okay, if you don't want to believe it, you're not going to believe it, but it happened. I'm not saying that they're going to, go after an NBC studios executive and threaten him or do anything to him. No, they're just going to cut off access to selling products, media products in China, or getting access to China. That's what they're going to do. So we no longer hear about Tibet much anymore in it. But so you don't hear these kinds of things. You don't see these kinds of things going on. And some of them I don't quite honestly understand. And the reason I say that is, you're going to get repaired over there. That's fine. Are you guys home yet? Yes. No. We need to... Aren't you going to go home? Oh, we need to go a little bit faster. Yeah, there we are. So, they always complain about like I say, I don't understand why they don't. Is it just they're now reflexive anti-Americanism? Because I can't understand why the left doesn't want to protest some of the actions of, say, Iran or other non-left organizations. And yes, you right-wingers out there, you're free to post your belief as why, you know whether it's just anti-Americanism or whatever. But I would really love to hear somebody on the left why they don't, or why they think there is this silence to people who to protest for arms sales, specifically to nations who are anti-American, or by anti-American nations. So yes, we know you're coming here. Okay, we've got the pocket closed. We know you're coming here, but that's going to close in just a moment. That was the plan. Okay, you guys, so they may take back Ling Bai, but we still got that all pocketed, all these units pocketed. This zero good, this is just this little guy just sort of attacking just to mess with them a bit. Okay, you're there to keep that closed. You can go there because you guys are going down there. They're going to defend there. Okay, you can stop and just go to the defensive. And CAG bomber focused. Very good. Okay, we're going to stop that. That's just way too far into the future. And we don't really need it right now. I mean, they could be useful for bashing on China, CAG bombers, but well, let's go with Armor HQ. That will reduce attacks and give us some interesting Armor HQs, hopefully. So the news media goes crazy. Oh, yeah. Now, it used to be the news media would report on bad things did by anti-American peoples. Like when Japan is attacking in China. The news media would report on it, even when it wasn't being directed against America. But they would still report on it then. But now, they don't. Okay, you can support the attack, but we don't want to give them a gap. Okay, yeah, I think support is good. You can move there. Yeah, this should turn around very quickly now that we have proper infantry divisions down there. Someone stole our blueprints. be there, well, they'll be there quicker. And they'll be there fairly quick. Okay, you strike that way. You support that attack. There we go, those infantry tanks sure turn it around quickly. You can support that. And you support that. And you, how long until you can operate? Okay, you support that, I'll probably be going. This is looking better. They have moved in at least one division in here while shuffling out some others. Okay, well, let's support that attack and support it with these guys. So now they're attacking from at least 2 provinces, which will help. Getting an awfully big stack of units in here. Okay, militia, you just come into the meat grinder. You guys get in there too, you're in good shape. You can get out. Okay, that looks pretty good. And you have big massive counterattack, but that's why we have at least one guy purely defending. Artillery brigade, that will really help us. Very good. Yeah, come over here. Okay, well, now we're pushing too far ahead. Those will be useful, and we will look at those soon, but Monroe effect. Okay, that's something good to get now. The Monroe effect. Monroe, I forget. He was, I believe, somebody in the U.S. military establishment, but he gets the. Well, we've had some submarines. Let's put one sub into production, regular sub. The hollow charge type thing, you know, to punch through armor. That would be helpful. Oh, that's right. I sent over a bunch of the military police that showed up. Okay, well, no wonder this is so green up here. Yeah, right about there. That will help. I left the ship to come rebase down here, just so you're not sucking supplies, so that way we have more control over our partisans and territories and whatnot. If we can, I hope we can take this, because if we can take this, we don't have to defend too many other provinces. Economy of force and all of that. I don't care about losing that if we do. No use to me at the moment. Oh great, looks like we're getting across this river. Hopefully very soon. Ground attack tactics have advanced. Okay. That is also useful, because we're using some of that currently. And I'm going to let that go. I think we're going to strike south here. Oh, you're still defending. you support their strike south. And so it's happening from more than one place. And you support that attack. Okay, we've created a new pocket here. They'll be able to supply if they have any transports left this way, but we've got these guys and we're going to put them here and they're going to convoy raid. So if there isn't enough anti-convoy operations shutting off Shanghai, we got more. And you can go back to here. Get off of their establishment here, but now police won't help much, but they're there to... Okay, when will they get there? 31 May, okay. Now, I think it'll be quicker to do this, and then, okay, so now it's April 30th, so that's not very far away, and I think the time to get reorganized after your train trip will be a lot less time total. Okay, mass events advance. Big party rally. Okay, there we go. Good. And what's this? Small arms have advanced. Very good. Something that the Japanese didn't do well. Not that they were bad, and actually in the day when the Arasaka was sort of first developed, it was way back then. I mean, that was before World War One. It really was sort of cutting edge. But, and they'd often, or I don't know, have to, but often buy a few examples of Western you know, gun tech and whatnot, and sometimes they did license and make direct copies. You know, they'd always sort of like, hey, yeah, send us a few, let us test it out, and we're not going to buy any from you, but we, you know, or in large numbers, but we may license, you know, production from you. Well, what they often ended up doing, and I don't know exactly why, is end up making a very similar but different working copy of thing. Often, I would say not as good, not necessarily terrible or bad or doesn't work anything. I'm not saying anything like that. Okay, we're gonna send you down. Like I said, I don't really care, but I am seeing that if we can get down here, we can help support this battle and whatnot. And we've got this now wrapped up in one way or another. And so you come off with, like I say, there's a few things, before I start naming names, we'd want to look them up again, that they do license and make direct copies of. But a lot of times they go, okay, yeah, this is sort of your basic principle, this is sort of your basic work. Okay, well, we're going to design our own. So, you know, has the magazine, you know, in the same place. It's sort of like some of their stuff looks sort of like Bren guns. But they don't work anything like Bren guns. So they've looked at it, and I don't know why, you know, or this ZB26 type thing or something. I don't know why they didn't just license and use the other ones, because what they end up doing, including one, is a hopper. Instead of a magazine on it, they have a hopper that you pour stuff into, you know, like a bunch of things to then be sorted out. But instead of dropping that in, you drop in stripper clips, and the machine gun will fire the stripper clips. So it's much better than that Italian Breda machine gun I rented and raved about, and a few people. It's really that bad, and they looked it up on Wikipedia, and yep, they see, yep, it's really that bad as I went on about it. So it isn't as bad as something as that because, you know, it's using 5-round stripper clips. And I don't know, the hopper holds like 4 of them or something. I've been a while since I've looked any of this up. But you shoot a burst or two of machine gun, the guy next to you, because one person can operate and shoot it, but they're sort of designed to be one person to carry. You know, it's a bipod type machine gun, light machine gun, designed to be carried by one person. But even like a Bren gun, they're designed to have at least a secondary person with you to sort of either to swap the magazines out for you or at least hand you the magazine, so you don't have to go, if you're laying down prone, you don't have to roll over on your side because the magazines are sort of on your stomach, and get one out and put it into the and take the old one out and put the new one in, and then because you don't always get fresh magazines, you get more ammo later on, so you got to then put the magazine away or put it on the side and pick it up later. You sort of have an assistant. I mean, just an efficiency thing, again, very doable with one person, but the system is designed to generally have 2 people to operate a light machine gun, even a magazine fed one. But and for running an assault on the enemy, it's, you have your assistant sort of running and taking cover behind you and with you, and you can, very much move that light machine gun and get it into place, and then move it to the next one and to the next one, but still, and so operate it singly. But that's sort of for brief periods of time, because you've only got 20 or 30 rounds, and then you've got to reload, and so you need to get to cover and whatnot, and that's when your assistant sort of, is catching back up and helping with you. So it's not like trying to be a medium machine gun, tripod separate from the main gun, and you're moving them all around and setting them up and getting them into position. As a bigger team. But still, so they come up with these things, and the hopper thing works, but not that well. It's not terrible, to the best of my knowledge. I have not shot them, only seen video of them being shot, and they seem it's okay, but it's not, like I say, you can shoot a few rounds, enough to empty one stripper clip full, and drop in another stripper clip and whatever in there, but they're just sort of gravity held there, so if anything sort of, if you tilt the gun or something, the ammunition will fall out. And it's sort of a neat idea in concept, but it doesn't really work, and after a while, Japan discontinues making them, I believe. I think before the Pacific War starts. So it's something they made thousands of, but they don't keep making it. They move to something that looks superficially like a Bren gun, and that has a banana magazine on top, has a bipod, it has a carrying handle up there, but the mechanism is very different. And so I don't know whether it's just not wanting to pay a licensing fee, national pride, different manufacturing techniques that Japan at the time did better or easier. I mean, there may be some good reasons, I just don't know. But they seem to, redesign things that not always bad. And I'm not going there with that. We can probably stop this. We're doing well enough. Bad, but they're not, and to the best of my understanding, which I think I have a fairly good understanding of small arms, including small arms in World War II. To the best of my understanding, they're not substantially better than just going, oh, hey, we've got got this thing, it works, let's do it, kind of thing, So, the Battle of Nanjing is underway in earnest. Before it was just a probing attack, now we are assaulting. And bombing. Don't know if we're still bombing or they're taking breaks. Okay, good. You've got that. Now, charge into there. See, it was a good idea to have these guys already sort of putting pressure on that province. Yeah, it's just things like that that make me wonder about what's going on at times. You can go into there. Again, I don't need you, but hold this. Don't care that much. But I want to sort of help this out because I do sort of need to get that. or we've opened ourselves up to being pushed too deep. And here we want to get and take this. Then we're going to take this before we push down too much more into here. But if we can take Nanjing, we can then do a pincer movement there and get this other pocket done. But Nanjing is sort of the key to that. Red Fleet Officer Purge. Okay, yes. Yes, they did have the, I don't know, was it the Battleship Potemkin? That's this one that's sort of popping in mind, that at St. Petersburg that fired the shells that sort of started the St. Petersburg, or Petrograd at the time, or whatever, uprising of the revolution in Russia. But really, Stalin, you got to get rid of your officers in the Red Fleet too. Folding wings. Yeah, this is not something as a given. See, I think, and again, I'm only recently reading about some of these enough to sort of know the names to some degree. I think it was the F-4F American fighter, which the carrier fighter, which was more or less the main carrier fighter that the U.S. enters the war with, initially does not have folding wings. It's a fixed-winged aircraft. So that, and they had already started doing folding wing models by 41 when the U.S. enters the war, but they have a bunch made that aren't folding wings. They add folding wings, and that's a Grumman design, and they really do this really tight articulated folding thing that folds back and along the fuselage. And then the F-6F or whatever uses the same wing folding capability. That's sort of the main one through most of the war, or much of the war, fighter type. And that does have, again, the wings fold all the way back along the side of the aircraft. And you can see a picture of the F-4F, if I hope I'm getting this right. And they have 3 of the folding winged aircraft take up the same space as a single non-folding wing of the same type. Now, in actual fact, it isn't 3-to-1 because an aircraft isn't quite exactly square, so you can sort of interlock the situations, the aircraft, so that in the hangar space, it's not like you're parking cars that they're right next to each other. You sort of have sort of jigsaw puzzles so that the wings sort of take up some of the same space. So they weren't, I think it ends up being, instead of 3-to-1, more like, I don't know, twice as many aircraft as you could hold in a practical sense. But another thing is the aircraft elevators, move it from the flight deck, or move it from the hangar to the flight deck. If they're the fixed wing, you can only move 1 at a time. But if they're the folded wing and you want to move them up as folded, you can move 2 up at a time. So you could get them onto the flight deck much faster, basically twice as fast. Maybe not quite twice as fast in a practical sense, but because there's more to it than that. But I don't, know. But you can get them up a lot faster and get them, as well as recover them. If you've got to, to get them off of the flight deck and get them below, you can get them down much faster. So the Americans sort of win the folding wing space up, because if you look at a Zero, and they've seen like at least the models next to each other, the Zero with its sort of folded wings, because it had the landing gear out on the wings, and so which do fold up under the aircraft, but the fold starts at the edge of the landing gear and then just sort of goes straight up. Where the U.S. and the Grumman people had the landing gear to come out from under the fuselage, so that the wings, basically almost all of the wing is, moved back to the side. And you could easily see, generally speaking, the Grumman model for the various ones would take up about half the space as a Zero. Again, the Zero, you could sort of do the puzzle piece situation and squeeze in more aircraft, and so that's probably more of a 3-to-2 situation. 3 Grumman in the same space as 2 Zeros or something on, in a practical sense. But the Americans sort of won the contest for the most foldy of wings and the type, and they used it for the later torpedo bombers and other stuff like that, and did very well with that. But it is far from a given. And some of the earlier ones too, and not sure on the Japanese or something, but I've seen it's just sort of like the last foot of the wingtip or something folds up, just something minor helps, but if you have good folding wings, it really does. I think that's under help. Now, of course, this just gives us a little efficiency, and we can't do difference with this between American and Japanese, or simple, level 1 and level 2. But that would be one that would have the basis for a level 1 and level 2. Okay, let's look back here. Okay, 38 armor hangar. We are already building one more carrier and one more battleship. These damage control stuff, well, that would be build cost goes down, sea defense. I don't know that I want to do this. Found out there's, I think, 5 different treatments used at this period because I was looking at a chart. Once I sort of get into these things, I think you can sort of tell, so I'm not giving anything away here, a bit of an obsessive personality. I can get really focused on things, including making episodes twice as long as I should. But I found I was looking for some stuff on armor penetration for U.S. naval guns. Just sort of wanted to see, and it came up with a chart, and they had fired it, some guns at some different guns and ammo and stuff. But they had, several like special treatments or cemented armor, and, specifying the German, the Italian, the British, the Japanese, which I think is based on the Vickers system, but it's somewhat different or something. And so they tested them out versus the American setting. So they tried it out against a bunch of ship armors that they had access to, and did studies on how well, X-type round coming out of Y-type of gun, and how well it was penetrated. So yeah, the U.S. did study all this stuff, and more of that's getting online. Okay, we're going to do, because I don't think this is upgradable unless we send it back. And yeah, I know I'm starting 1, but we've already got it to 38. I'm not so worried about, and in fact there is a reason not to, is that speed, negativity there, to not overly armor the carriers. Some level of protection is good, because you need to plan that you're going to be hit. Japan's biggest faults, and they tried in the Taiho and sort of the end, but they didn't. Ended up sort of some of their measures ended up sinking the ship faster. But they did not do. Japan did not do well in any of its pre-war carriers in either designing in damage control systems. Things like. I'm not saying they didn't have firefighting equipment. I know they did have firefighting equipment. But the Americans, shall we say, did better in making, I don't know, pipes go everywhere, and redundant pipes and things like that, so that, water could flow better, around, and other sort of shoring up and damage control. And the Americans did a lot more. I mean, orders of magnitude more damage control training than the Japanese did. They got better at it, but they never came anywhere coming up close to it. And I know part of the reason, I know why, without having heard it in any of the documentaries or any of the books that I've read. It goes back to their airplane philosophy. Their airplane philosophy on the Zero. And it wasn't just whatever the guy's name was, who was the primary designer's philosophy. It was their overall military philosophy, and he was designing to it. Those are aircraft for the attack. They're to be fast. They're to be maneuverable, faster and maneuverable than the enemy. And you are going to be offensively minded. So you're going to charge at the enemy. And, oh, well, hey, you've got a big engine in front of you, so that's going to be your armor. No extra armor, no designed armor. It's your engine's going to be armored. And yeah, because you're going to be flying at bombers potentially, that are going or head to head on fighters or something like that. So yeah, but all of the shots are going to be coming at the front of you, not at your flanks or your rear. And no, they're not so stupid as to know that it's never going to happen, but they're believing that it's going to be a great bulk of the time, and partially because, again, they're faster and more maneuverable, so that when the enemy does sort of get on your rear, you either power away from it or you turn rapidly away from it and turn back and around and get on their tail faster than, turn better than they could. And the Zero was very good at that kind of stuff. So to achieve those goals, instead of like, an F-4 Phantom, now an older aircraft. I mean, it was older. It was a Vietnam-era aircraft, but when I was around, the U.S. Navy was still flying them. You can look at, a lot of the F-4 Phantom sort of pilot and thing. Who needs aerodynamics when you know how to build engines? Because you can watch some flight to where they'll basically, the first hovering aircraft is the Harrier. Yeah, F-4 Phantom can hover in place. You just, and just point it towards the sky, and it'll sit there and hover. You can't land it because it has no landing abilities. I guess you could then sort of turn the engine off and pancake down or something, but yeah, and you can. And I've seen some of these aircraft that are the way they're sort of flying and maneuvering them. The wings are almost irrelevant to them, and so you can build engines that are just sort of rocket ship type engines, so that the engine thrust in and of itself is enough to the Harrier does it too, thrust to get it off the ground without any aerodynamic help to do that. So you can design that way. And so the Japanese weren't designing engines to do that. They were removing all non-essential stuff to have their engine perform really well. Now, of course, that ends up having massive vulnerable weaknesses, and eventually the U.S. comes up with faster aircraft than, what is it, the Thunderbolt or whatever, and several of the other very fast stuff. So the U.S. eventually outdoes it, and Japan is never able to keep up in the field except for the very end, and they're sort of making their versions, mainly because they have the technical data, but they've sort of got to start over to some of the copies of the German jets. So yeah, they're making some jets that could outfight some of the American non-jets. I don't know that they're any better than our early jets that we never got into combat in World War II, but because by the time they were sort of ready, Germany almost had no air force, and Japan had nothing that could compete with us. So there was no point in it. But yeah, so it's that philosophy of, why do you need damage control on your carriers? Just sink all the enemy ships with your bombers before they get anywhere near them, and use your fighters to destroy all the enemy aircraft, and you'll be fine. It's that philosophy, that sort of samurai blade. The samurais also wore armor, but that samurai blade concept of that first strike, that offensive strike, is going to win, is going to take them down. Now, of course, they realized with battleships, which are meant to get within, and part of the idea is carriers get them in range of enemy surface ships. Hell no. We have, and they had slow ones too, and we can see them here, but they also had their good design carriers are fast. We're just going to drive in the opposite direction from any battleships that may get anywhere even near our carriers, and we're going to go in the opposite direction. So they're not surface warfare ships, and they understood the Navy, the Japanese, and, I know I have some Japanese viewers, very few of them post. In no way am I saying they're stupid or they don't understand things. It just, you got to understand at least their philosophy at the time. And I'm not an expert, but I have some knowledge on this stuff from studying Japan and studying this stuff. So it's just that philosophy of being on the offensive and doing that. And I think also part of it, I will say, is what we're facing here is the amount of ICs versus the amount of German ICs is it's a limitation on their production too. I'm sure they would go, yeah, it'd be nice to have armored carriers. But as I've talked about before, Japan's Navy is starved for steel. Japan's Navy, the last sort of straw that got the Japanese Navy to agree to go to war with America, because the Japanese Navy had to agree to go to war with America, because how do you invade the Philippines if you're the Japanese Army, or invade Hawaii if you're the Japanese Army, or even invade Malaya and Singapore if you're the Japanese Army, if the Japanese Navy won't take you there? You know, you have to have the cooperation of the Navy. And as we've talked about, this is a divided government and a divided military, to the point that either side can take its pieces and go home. And there is no concept of a joint command. I mean concept, not that there isn't any structure. There is no concept of a joint command at the higher levels in the Japanese military throughout this period. And as whether you want to say, and I've seen Hirohito mostly in his, and I've used some of, picture from Time magazine cover, an artist drawing nice and colorful of him in sort of an army uniform. I've recently seen another one in sort of navy whites, of him there showing up at some Navy event. And theoretically, the Emperor is, somehow the head of these organizations. But in a practical sense, he has no interaction. And throughout this whole process, he is never in a place to order the Japanese Navy to, yes, the Army's going to war, you must do this. And even if he was, or you go, well, he could have, and because then I sort of blame him for some of the atrocities, because he could have stopped them. And I do believe that to be the choice. And so even if he does, quote unquote, step out of the role and character that he has, he could have ordered the Navy. But that doesn't mean, and the Navy would say, yes, sir, or yes, your majesty, or whatever. But that doesn't mean they're going to do it. Oh, we have delays. Oh, we have problems. Oh, we can't do this. Oh, this other thing. And be very, very, very reluctant to do anything. So there's an agreement. The last agreement was Tojo to whoever, I forget, whoever the head of the Japanese naval ministry or whatever. What if we up your steel allotment tonnage by X amount? Some really big. This is obviously for future. This is, in sometime late 41, obviously before December, but I don't know the exact time, to get them to sort of agree that we're going to war if, for some reason, and when there's no sign of the Americans backing down, but unless they don't, we're going to war. Because even Yamamoto was and he gave a speech to the assembled captains of the fleet, or actually there were fleets, because there was the ships with the air fleet, and then there was another fleet going along with them. The fleets going out to attack Pearl Harbor, as well as some of the other ones, is you may get a recall notice. Be prepared up until launching of the fighters, that you may get a recall notice, because again, I'm not talking about the high command of the Navy, but he was very much on the we don't want to go to war with Britain or America. But if the Navy's going to go to war with him, and he knew at that point that there was, he could quit in protest, he could, suicide in protest, but they were still going to go to war. So he wanted to do the best job he could. But he was very much on the idea that, you fleet, if I send out a recall order, you do it. Now, I don't know, and I don't think, again, I don't know, but I also don't think that he was thinking or hoping or whatnot for a coup against the warmongers or something, but I think he was holding out some sort of, hope that there would be a diplomatic solution that would be good enough for the Japanese government, ambassadors, whatever, to accept and to step back. So radio silence, but keep listening, you may get a recall order. That's Yamamoto. But it was to give to steel enough steel, and that's enough steel for this coming year of 1942 to build ships for either 43 or 44. Especially if they're big ships, they're going to take a couple years to be built. So part of all of this austerity in some of their ship design is just practical limitations of steel, of industrial capability, and all of it. Some of it is that, but you could easily have one less carrier and get more steel armor for your other carriers. You could easily make that choice. You can easily do, building time, and because whether it's subcontractors making a widget that then you take to the shipyard and you attach to the ship, or welders or riveters or whatever that are putting the ships together, you can easily take a little bit more time and extend the production length of a carrier. That's why some of this stuff is really appropriate. By doing this, these don't. I think some of these have, build time. You see, carrier deck armor optimization, build time, build cost. And this is why black ice. This is why I'm only, now looking a little bit more into some of the naval and naval air warfare. I've always watched a few movies, seen some documentaries, but don't necessarily internalize this stuff. This is why I've always sort of trusted that black ice is at least trying to do a good job. Not that they're getting everything right all the time, but they're trying to get a good job at doing this stuff. Is because, yes, the difference between America and Japan is more build time, more build cost. America has the ICs for it. Japan ends up doing some of this, at least some of the carrier deck armor stuff, but in their Taiho class. And so they do get some of the stuff improved. But so there is a cost thing, and they could get, pay the cost and do it, but they just think that with their tactical and other sort of operational use concepts, it's not needed. It's sort of a luxury that is in austerity Japan is not needed, and we will win just fine. And of course the communists break out. And we're going to end the episode here. I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank you for liking the videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And of course, please post questions, comments, corrections, because I know I'm getting some of this stuff wrong on any of the topics. Because I love to hear from you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron. And we need to